Okay. Let me know if you guys could hear everything all right. And once we're pretty good here, we'll get going. So, we're just going to do kind of all things country guitar. And I don't have any kind of lesson planned out or anything. I just thought I would open it up and just see what questions you guys have. And cool. Thanks, Britt. Just see if I could answer any questions. So a lot of you may have noticed that I just put out a essentials course on country soloing, and the idea with that course was to kind of mirror the survival guide for rhythm guitar, for country rhythm guitar. So I wanted each study to kind of deal with a different style of country music and things that are common, just little like idiosyncrasies that are common for each style, like what you would choose to play over a shuffle, what you would choose to play over a rockabilly tune, what you wouldn't play over those things. So so if you have any questions about any kind of styles or techniques with country guitar, we don't have to limit it to that though either. If you want to get into Western swing or rockabilly or any the blues stuff, that's fine too. I'm pretty open here, so whatever you guys want. So I'll just wait for some questions to kind of come in, and then see if I can help you out. Got anything? I know it takes there's a little delay here, about like 15 seconds. So underlying rhythm of Western swing. Well, it's just swung eighth notes. We could talk about that a little bit. The most important thing when you're playing any kind of swing music is really just making sure that your eighth notes are swinging, and you can practice this with scales or pentatonic scales or major scales, whatever you want, or just on one note. And just make sure that it feels good with the track. Rhythmically, triplets, eighth notes, quarter notes. You don't have to do anything too sophisticated rhythmically. It's more about how it feels. Let's see here. Do you use country sixths or thirds over 2/5s? I use all different things over 2/5-1s. So for you folks out there, a 2/5-1 is a progression. I could set up a new tonal center. I could set up the one chord, or I could kind of give the illusion of another chord being its own tonal center. So if we were in G, the 2 chord of that key is an A minor, the 5 chord is D, and that leads you to that G. So a lot of times I'm not thinking necessarily intervals. I'm thinking about chord shapes, or I'm thinking about arpeggio notes, targeting chord tones, and embellishing chord tones. Very rarely am I thinking about using scales over that stuff unless it's more modern jazz, but usually with Western swing music and country, if that happens, it's really about outlining chord tones. So to give you an example, there's my 2 chord, an A minor, and you could pick any chord shape you want for this. I could have picked this up here, an inversion A minor there. So, and then for your 5 chord, the same thing. You can pick a D7 there. You could pick a D9 chord. You could do an altered thing and do a D9 sharp 11 if you want. And then you can outline these things. So this is a nice little shortcut. Again, there's endless ways to approach this, but I could go up one arpeggio and come down another one and resolve on G, and that's like a very, very simple way of doing it. Or I can embellish any one of those chord tones with half-step approaches. Okay, so there I was kind of dancing around a lot of those notes. Going a half step underneath to a diatonic step above. And then landing on them. And if you want to get more of an altered sound, you could use things like a diminished scale. So you can come up that A minor, and maybe you can use that D diminished scale. You could do a whole tone scale. Right. So there's a lot of different ways you can play over 2/5s, but I rarely think of 6s and 3rds when I play over that. It's all arpeggio notes and dressing up arpeggio notes. What guitar is that? It's a parts caster. It's I think it's a USA custom body. It's a Music Craft neck. When they were doing those, what they call the Blackguard necks, along with that book that came out about all the Blackguard tellies. So it's a pretty big neck on it. It's a soft feed to C. And then I had Mark Jenny finish it in nitro, and it's Loughlin pickups, Charlie Christian pickup, because I do play a lot of swing on this guitar too. Glendale saddles with the aluminum saddle on the bottom. So it's just kind of a parts caster. Let's see, width, thickness, and pick to use. I use these the old Tex, the old Tex ones here. That's kind of the main pick that I use. Sometimes when I'm playing acoustic instruments, I'll turn it on its side, and I'll use the rounder side. But I don't really mess with picks too much unless I'm playing acoustic guitar on like pop and rock stuff. If I'm recording, I'll use thinner picks sometimes if I want more of a percussive sound, because a lot of times the acoustic guitar is kind of serving the role of a shaker in a lot of pop music. Or even country music when you're just strumming around. Why aluminum here? Well, the aluminum is a little bit brighter than the brass, so it kind of brightens up the low E and A, and to my ears, it just makes everything sound a little bit more even across. So, yeah, that's why I do that. Use of half whole scale. So you mean the diminished scale? I'm assuming that's what you mean. Yeah, the diminished scale, I was just talking about that with the 2/5s. You could put a diminished scale or a diminished arpeggio in a lot of different places. Maybe we'll talk about country shuffles for a second, because that's a good place to use a lot of diminished stuff. So if we were doing a country shuffle in C, just kind of a simple 1-4-5 thing in C. There's a few places you can almost put on every single chord here. So as the 1 is leading into the 4 chord, you could do a diminished scale there. And as the 4 chord leads into the 5, as the 5 leads back into the 1. So what it's going to do, it's the diminished scale can make any chord sound altered. Kind of like a quick way of getting a lot of altered notes. So we'll go over in C to F, so you can kind of see the role that it's playing. So the C is the root, obviously. That C sharp can play the role of the flat 9. That E flat can play the role of the sharp 9. Then you have E, which is your 3rd. There's a flat 5, 5. You have your 6, your flat 7, your root. So you get all those altered notes. And that kind of implies that raised diminished chord, which leads nice into the 4. And you could do that again, leading into the 5. And do it again, leading into the 1. Let's see. I hope that helps you out. Approach to faking his solo for a song you're not familiar with. Well, that's tough. I would say, that's where doing all your homework of working on your ear training and working on your knowledge of the fretboard, and that's what's going to help you out. And listen. You don't have to play flurries of notes nonstop. Listen in those cases, let your ear guide you along. And that's not a moment to try to be showing off or playing a bunch of licks, because you have no idea what's happening. So that's where you want to rely on your ear training. Oh, I'm glad you liked the Tex Mex piece in there. Yeah, I was happy to put that in there. I love that music. And it's something different too. You don't see that a lot in the country courses, so I wanted to include the Tex Mex study in the new Essentials Country Soloing. Let's see here, from Miguel. Wow, so Miguel's asking, how do you improve your language with country music? And outside of like learning the guitar neck and doing a bunch of work with that, it's learning tunes. So if you're in a situation where you're trying to get inside that, learning the language of country shuffles, like learn a ton of country shuffles. Go and learn all the Ernest Tubb stuff, learn all the Buck Owens stuff, transcribe those solos. When you find little moments that you like about the solos, isolate those things and work those concepts. So a good example is something you hear often is this. Okay, that little arpeggio pattern. That's a neat little concept. So that's something that, like, if I heard as somebody doing that as a soloist, I would kind of write that out and go, okay, I want to make sure I put that through its paces, figure out what's going on there. So that was over a G. And one of the things I would do is kind of analyze this, like what's going from a chord tone down to another chord tone, and then this diatonic approach note above resolving on a chord tone. Okay, that's a pretty cool idea. Well, if I could do it there starting on the third, where else could I do it? The fifth and root. Maybe we could do off the root and third there. And then you start walking it through the neck. What about here? And you just kind of go through the whole neck and just find all the places you could do it. So I would do that in every position, try to figure it out, and then I would just set up a loop of maybe 2 chords, and I would sit there and try to overuse that lick as much as possible to try to get it in my hands, and maybe add the 5 chord, and get a 3 chord progression going on, creating like winnable battles for myself to assimilate this new idea. And that's how you just start chipping away at it and just start learning solos, learning little ideas, and putting them through their paces and getting to know them everywhere on the neck, and starting to make it your own a little bit. And you do that with everything. If you want to get into rockabilly, you got to search online, find a list of 50 greatest rockabilly tunes, and then just start learning them. And if you have a hard time kind of learning them and keeping them in your hands, put together a band that just plays rockabilly covers. There's been plenty of times that in New York, me and a bunch of friends of mine, anytime we want to get into a style of music or we're excited about something, we just put together a band that just plays nothing but that style, and just kind of throw yourself in the fire to, that language together, so you have this catalyst. And also getting things up on their feet to see what works and what doesn't work and where your weaknesses and strengths are. You kind of have to get it happening live. I'd love to do a rockabilly rhythm chorus. That would be really fun, and I think we should do something like that. So, stay tuned. Let's see here. Having a hard time transcribing Western string harmony chord changes every beat. Not necessarily, no. It's funny, I think with like a lot of teaching, you get everybody kind of gravitates towards Eldon Shamblin style of comping, which is like, you know, inversions all over the place. But to be honest, in the real world, you're not doing that often. That can be really distracting and annoying sometimes, to be, you know, adding all these kind of moving around and doing all these inversions, because, you know, it's not always going to line up with the bass player. And you have to have a great relationship with the bass player, where that's going to work out all the time. Otherwise, it's just a cacophony of bass notes that don't always line up. And I would guess that Eldon and the bass player of Bob Wills' band, whose name I can't remember right now, I would guess they had a lot of stuff worked out, you know, or just through playing together for years, they just kind of had their set languages and set things they do over certain changes, and they just always do them. So, but, you know, when in doubt, just, you know, root inversions are fun. There's nothing wrong with this. Nothing wrong with doing that through a Western swing tune. Movement happening in the bass and leaving space for, you know, for a singer, for people to do fills. You know, or pick your moments, you know, maybe in that same progression. Maybe you do that. You add like one little inversion before the 4 chord. Maybe that, you know. So you just have to use your ears and listen, you know, and just show some restraint. If you're playing in a guitar duo and playing Western swing stuff, obviously, if it's like 2 guitars, you know, you have a lot of room to kind of add walking bass lines and do the Eldon Shamblin thing, and that's going to sound great. So, yeah, don't feel like you have to play a chord on every beat. Let's see here. How do you chicken pick when bending a note, then slowly releasing it? Oh, I think you talked about the this thing. So that's I heard James Burton do that on Las Vegas, and it's so great when he does it because it cuts right through a mix, because, you know, he's using a thumb pick and he's got the banjo picks. And to be honest, it lays a lot nicer with no pick in your hand. When you're just doing that, you could do it, you could be so much stronger with it. But, you know, I'm not going to be playing with a thumb pick and banjo picks for that. So the way I do it, this would be an E. You could do this off of any double stop, really. But I got the D and I got the A here. And I'm playing those two together. And every time I grab the 2 notes, I'm using my 2 fingers. So you see that there? So when I grab those 2, and I bend it to pitch, and as it's up there, I'm going to go back and forth between the 2 fingers grabbing the double stop and the pick coming across to pick just the bottom note. And then I just go back and forth. And what happens is that bottom note never gets a chance to really ring out. It just gets choked the whole time. And then you could do the thing where you do a slow release of that. So that's how you do that. And like I said, you could do it anywhere. And you don't have to do it as a double stop too. You could just go back and forth between 2 notes. So just middle finger on top and pick on the bottom. All right, let me see. Finger picking better than flat? No, it's different. You know, just different colors, different for each style. It depends on what style of music you're playing or what sound you like. If you're somebody who really likes James Burton's playing, or you know, or Brent Mason or somebody like that, it's like, yeah, play with thumb pick. You know, that's your thing. You should do that thing. Let's see. When you take a lead, what's your process? Are you basically connecting well-practiced licks together, or is it more? Yeah, I'm not really thinking licks. There are things that are templates to me, especially when things are faster tempos. But I try not to think of licks or use licks when I play. So, you know, it's coming at it from a bunch of different ways. If I'm flat picking, I've taught this in that Blues Connections course, and I think I talked about it maybe one of the country courses a bit. But if I'm flat picking, I'll do a couple different things. One of the things I'll do is to voice lead or connect major pentatonics. So if I was in G, and here's my major pentatonic in G, and I went to a C chord, I would just go to the closest position of that C major pentatonic. And if I go to D, the closest one of D is here. So, and then I just try to voice those things. And what I would do is kind of tedious, but with all my students, it really works out. They, end up getting a lot of command. Is to just pick a rhythm, like eighth notes or something simple at first, and let's say I'll give each chord 2 measures. So I'll go up G for 2 measures, and C, and then D, and then back to G. So that whenever that 2 measures is up, I'm going to go right into the next major pentatonic scale. So if I'm ascending, I want to keep ascending. If I'm descending, I want to keep descending. And I'll show you the process slow first, so you can kind of see the work involved. But so it'd be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Okay, so that filled up 2 measures of G. The next note I want to play has got to be part of the C major pentatonic. I want to keep descending. Now the next measure I want to play is D. I want to keep ascending. So I have to visualize that major pentatonic. Okay, so you get the idea. So I would do that for all 5 positions, and then I would start adding passing tones. Okay, and that starts getting a little more colorful. And the passing tones that I was adding were the flat 3 and the flat 7. And those are just 2 common passing tones that could sound really good. So once you've been doing that, moving around and flat picking in those positions ends up being pretty easy. The other thing I'm doing when I'm soloing in a position like that is I'm always aware of where all the notes of the chord are. So in that position. And that's where you could use, somebody use the cage system. That could be like a quick shortcut to that. With the cage system, I think it's just, think of that as just a general concept. I know there's like an official cage system that I've never even checked out. I'm never sure what that, is. To me, cage, it's just visualize chord shapes. I mean, that's been going on since Charlie Christian and Django Reinhardt, and all improvisation early on was embellishing arpeggio notes and embellishing a melody. The idea of like using scales is more of a modern way of improvising, to be honest. And I still don't really think of scales that much. To me, a scale is an arpeggio with passing notes in between. So, and with a passing note, like arpeggio is like, okay, those are all my points of rest. Those are points of resolve. A passing note in between is a tension, and that could be anything. I don't care if that's, so if I'm going from G to B, that could be diatonic, could come from the scale. It could be chromatic. It could be a diatonic set from above. Like there's a million ways I can get from origin to destination, and all of them are pointed, their tension. That's their whole purpose. So it's, in some ways, it's like, I mean, it does matter what you're doing, and it's obviously going to affect the musicality of a thing, but in other ways it doesn't matter. It's just the role of tension. So playing scales is important to me, and of course study that stuff, but as knowing where I'm coming from and where I'm going to, or where I want my point of resolve to be. And to get a little bit more into soloing, so I showed you some flat picking, or things I would do to embellish arpeggios. If I'm soloing, say, over something slow, it doesn't have to be slow, but sometimes I'll come up with I'll establish a motif really quick, and that could be something like, okay, I'm going to target the third, and then it's just as broad as that, and then you have to figure out new ways of getting in and out of that third. So, I might slide into a third. Let me go to a C chord. Then to a D. There's a third of D. Third of D, an octave lower. Back to the third of G. So when you do something like that, it helps tie everything together. It acts as this like emulsifier, and it kind of gives you like a through line. So for a listener, they don't always go like, oh, he's always hitting the third. Obviously, most people don't know that. Is that whether they can identify it or not, they do recognize that that particular note has a certain relationship to the harmony that's familiar, so that could just come as a feeling to them as they're listening to it, this idea of something familiar. Now, how you get in and out of it and how do you add variations in and out of that note is the newness, and there's the balance, and that's something that I try to think of all the time when I'm improvising or composing, is a balance of something new and something familiar all the time. So, and I can take that even further in a balance of when you're soloing or composing of something beautiful and something ugly, or something cerebral or something primal, So if I'm doing something that's like, very smart, kind of, where I'm like jazzing it up, at some point, I try to recognize this, like, okay, is this becoming a little too cerebral? When it does, like, you could use like a blues scale thing, like, and that could be like a palate cleanser in a lot of ways, or it could feel more primal, to end, say, a phrase like, so as it's almost like a little button on the end of something, or guttural kind of way to end. But that could have been anything. It could have been an ugly rhythm. It could have been an ugly sound. Whatever. Who's like really great at that thing, and I'll end this tangent in a minute, is one of my favorite improvisers is a trumpet player named Lee Morgan, and some of you don't know, I actually went to school for classical trumpet, and he was always like my favorite jazz trumpet player, one of my favorite improvisers. And I think because he does that so well, if you listen back to any of his work with the Jazz Messengers or with Coltrane, he's so great at really developing ideas using compositional devices like repetition, or octave displacement, or playing things backwards, or whatever it may be, or rhythmic variation. And then, as he's doing that, when things start to get a little cerebral, he's so great at just getting right back to the blues, or getting right back to something ugly to kind of ground you again. And I think that's a pretty great gift. That that's something that you should always keep in mind when you're writing and playing. Where are you playing live coming up? I play every other Monday night at Skinny Dennis with my band, the String Gliders. Sometimes we just do country music. Sometimes we do rockabilly. And I play every other Thursday with a band called North Amarillo. And that's all the Emmylou Harris hot band era stuff. And I do that with Luca Benedetti and Johnny Lamb and Kelly Scarr and Arthur Vint and Scott Goldberg. That's a really fun band. And then I have a band called Aquarium Solarium that plays around a bunch, that does all kind of whacked out surf exotica music. And besides that, like just freelance on a million other spots. But usually, I would say probably about 5 nights a week I'm performing. Let's see. Let me get another question here. Lap steel stuff. Yeah, sure. We get into lap steel stuff. So, you know, keep in mind with lap steel, if we're talking like Western swing lap steel, it's an instrument tuned to C6, and so you want to, you know, you want to use major 6 chords in the inversions, because that's going to be something that you would get underneath the slide. So to give you an example, if we were playing an A, there's an A6 chord, and I tend to stay on the top 4 strings with this stuff because, you know, the range of lap steel guitar is usually up higher anyway. It's rare that you're playing super low. So there's an A6. That also probably looks like an F sharp minor, and it's the same notes, just in a different context. And then here's an inversion of it. Okay, here's another inversion of it. Although I usually do it like that, to be honest. I throw that E on the bottom. So with those, you could do kind of partials. You can grab just 3 strings at a time. I can grab the bottom 3 of these 4 notes or the top 3. And I could slide in and out here. So already it's starting to sound a little like lap steel. Just through sliding and grabbing sets of 3 strings. Okay, and then you could do that with each one of these. Okay, now any one of these shapes, this is kind of cool, can be moved down a whole step to give you the notes of a dominant 9 chord. So here's my A on the bottom, and if I move this down, now I have a flat 7, a 9, a 5th, and a flat 7. So that's an A dominant 9. So what's nice about that is that helps connect all these things. So now you can feel like you're really descending. And then you just kind of, you know, if you're playing over a simple 1-4-5 progression, you just got to map those out for, you know, your D chord then and your E chord and find them. The other thing about that tuning is, let me just talk about that C6 tuning. On 6-string lap steel, you have C, E, G on the bottom, and you have an A minor triad on top, A, C, E, which means in the middle here, these 2 strings are a major second apart. So you get, you know, some tone clusters and stuff that could happen. So we don't want to just only do this stuff, which sounds great, and you could, and that would be totally believable and sound nice. But you want to try to get some of those clusters too. So you could do that on like the top strings here. There's a minor 3rd and a 2nd. You know, so for that stuff, I try to like move down to these strings and get some of those clusters. I could just take this cluster here, this major 2nd on the bottom, and a minor 3rd on top, or some kind of 3rd on top, and I can move it around diatonically. So I can move it up, right? Sorry. So you get some nice stuff with that, and then you could do the same thing on these 3 strings here too. You know, so and then just, you know, to add to that, you know, any of the volume swell stuff is going to help. You know, listen to lap steel players. You know, listen to Jerry Bird and stuff and the things he does. They'll do those big octave things. You know, or they'll do the imitating the plungers and stuff. You know. So you can get those. Obviously, it's easier on telly to do because, you know, these things are right, you know, right underneath. So, and you don't have to have big hands to do that. You watch videos of Danny Gatton playing; he's got small hands, definitely smaller hands than I do, and he's a master of that stuff. So, all right, let me see if I can answer any of the questions here. Country blues, like honky tonk style. I don't always think of honky tonk as blues. Honky tonk to me is just like kind of an umbrella term for dance music, But yeah, it depends on the tune. If it's a shuffle, you can get away with a lot on a shuffle as far as like harmonically goes. So we were talking about diminished stuff before that you could do for each chord. We were doing like a C diminished into the F, and then an F diminished into the G, and then a G diminished back to the C. A lot of times I'll just do the arpeggios of that. I don't always play the diminished scale. But so I'll use some of that stuff, and then I'll do a lot of substitution. So if I'm on, say, the 1 chord, there's 2 substitutions I could use that sound pretty good. One is to sub out the 4, and you've heard this, a million times if you listen to the Stones or something. You're hearing that the 4 of. But you can outline that in your solo. So if I was here in C, I could outline an F triad, which is the 4 of C. And the band isn't playing that. The band's just playing C. Okay, so I could do that 4 to 1 thing. I could also do a 5 to 1 thing. So I could play the 1 chord and outline the 5 there. In the key of C, the 5 is G. So that's all C. And then this would be G. So there's my flat 7, my 5th, my 3rd, landing back on the 1. And that could all be over the C chord. So there was an example of when I was going to that 5 chord, I was raising the root up to A flat, so I got a flat 9 sound, and that's kind of a cool thing to do too. So this would be the C, and then for the 5, I'm going to do flat 9. So those are 2 subs that I would do over C. The other thing, getting back to that 4 of, it always sounds nice when a 4 goes from a 4 to a minor 4, back to a 1. I'm sure we've heard that before in Nowhere Man, and a million songs do that, right? But that could be nice to do, as you don't make a big deal out of it, but you just kind of use it as a passing tone. So instead of doing that F to C, I might do, and just kind of use it as like a little approach note back to one of the notes that makes up the C. So where's another one? You could do that stuff over the G too, your 5 chord. Actually, on that the Essentials chorus, on that country shuffle, I do something where I do that on the G chord, the 5 chord, I do a 5 chord sub. So this is good. We talk about this because now you're kind of imagining the G, the 5 chord, as its own tonal center. And you have to ask yourself, okay, well, what is the 5 chord of G, which is D7, right? So now you can move through inversions of G and the D7 back to G, and you get some nice harmonic movement happening. So if I'm on G here and go to a D7, back to a G, and that's nice little passing stuff. And you can do that as a rhythm player too. If you're just, want some nice movement going down. But as a soloist, you can outline that stuff. So I can outline a G, a D7, and then land back on the notes of the G. And then you can alter it. I added that, and then it's easily done by just taking the root of the chord and bringing it up a half step. A lot of stuff like that, and any triplets sound good as a rhythm stuff. You know, blues stuff does sound good, throwing in little like bluesy licks and stuff. But again, I try to punctuate ideas. So, and the other thing, I know we're talking a lot about country shuffles, but I think it's worth talking about shuffles for a minute. A lot of times with country shuffles, I'll take the time to like learn the vocal melody, because again, they're dance tunes, and always kind of want my solo to sink back into the song. I don't want it to be something that like pops out like, hey, here's a guitar solo. I want it to be something that, like, you know, the dancers are just not even going to notice. They're just enjoying it. It's going to fit great. It's going to sound really good. So a lot of times, if I'll learn the vocal melody and I'll play that and maybe harmonize different or add some melodic variations to it, or, you know, sometimes I'll just play in my mind what would be another vocal melody. So, you know, if we're doing a shuffle in C, you know, I'll kind of come up with like, what would somebody sing over that, you know? You know, and then you could do that an octave higher and add a whole other chorus, and then you could add variations to that, but that would all kind of sink into the song and make sense for a shuffle. And I always think of, like, again, when I think of honky tonk music, the first style that comes to mind to me is country shuffles. Let's see here. Let me find another question. I suck at playing rhythm. What should I do? That's great. Well, you're looking to play country rhythm? If you're looking to play country rhythm, not to do too much self-promotion here, but I just think it's worth the money, rather than taking a bunch of private lessons, and at least kind of point you in the right directions, is check out the Country Survival Guide for Rhythm. That kind of gives you like all the common styles and a lot of the little, you know, calling cards and idiosyncrasies with that kind of stuff. And transcribe rhythm. Just transcribe a lot of rhythm guitar, you know, and then if you're looking for inspiration, transcribe all the other rhythm instruments. What's the piano player doing on this? You know, listen to like how's the steel comping over this. And as you're playing rhythm, if you're playing, especially if it's a two guitar thing, band that you're performing in, you know, you have a lot of room to kind of layer and do a bunch of stuff. But you can always, in your mind, take on other roles of instruments. Like you might start off, you know, a verse where you're just comping like a rhythm, you know, classic rhythm guitar for a shuffle, you know. And maybe the second verse, you know, okay, I'm going to be a steel player for the second verse, and you're, you know, and just kind of fill in the gaps between the vocalists, you know. But I would definitely take the time, learn versions of all the chords, you know, learn basic chord progressions and how they relate to each other. So, you know, learning a chord scale. So, you know, a 1 chord, a 2 chord, a 3 chord, a 4 chord, a 5 chord. Getting used to that, getting used to how those things sound. When you transcribe tunes, maybe write the Roman numerals over each one, so you get used to like, oh, so that's what it sounds like when a 5 chord goes back down to a 4 chord. You know, you start to catalog those sounds in your ear, like, you know, vocabulary words, you know, it's just, and they become sounds that you hear. And it's like, it doesn't matter what key, if you understand how a chord scale works, you start to really be able to hear. It's like, oh, 5 goes to a 4 chord, cool. And you don't have to know the key. Someone can be like, okay, it's in the key of D. It's like, okay, great, now I know that's A to G. Yeah, so, you know, working the theory knowledge, transcribing, other instruments other than guitar, that would help. Let's see here. Travis picking. Yeah, let's talk about Travis picking. Travis picking is, you know, it's like stride piano adapted to guitar. So the bottom 3 strings can be thought of as, you know, the left hand doing the stride, you know, alternating bass line. And then your top 3 strings are melody notes. So, and there's, of course, moments where those things will cross over a little bit, or compress into the top 4 strings. But overall, that's like the general rule. And then you want to just get like this, your alternating line, something that you don't have to think about. You know, so getting coordination with the thumb, getting comfortable with the thumb. You don't have to do this with a thumb pick, by the way. You could do it with picking fingers. You're going to, you know, get some limitations happening when you go to learn Chet Atkins stuff or Merle Travis. You know, overall, like, you can get away with a lot just using the picking fingers. So I like to use the thumb pick unless I'm just throwing it in on a country gig, and then I just do it with picking fingers. But once you get that happening with the Travis picking, you know, you can start doing things like adding notes just to the bass notes, adding melody notes on the same beat as the bass notes. That's what I meant to say. So maybe just a second string with that, getting comfortable with that, you know. Now maybe the second and first string. So you got to get coordinated with this stuff first. So now I would think it's like, okay, I'm pretty good going like second string to first string. Let me reverse it. Okay, now let me put them on the upbeat. So I'm going to have a bass note and a melody note on an upbeat. We'll start with 1 string again. Now it's starting to sound like Travis picking a little bit, right? I'm going to throw that first string in there. Right, and then I would reverse that. So I have like a bunch of patterns that I've made up for students and printouts and stuff for to get inside the Travis picking and get some independence. You know, and then there's just some classic patterns that you see often. That's a pattern that you hear a lot. And then those things can be templates for other things. So that, you know, so you can kind of get into like really simple stuff, and before you know it, it's such like a rabbit hole. Before you know it, you're wanting to learn how to play Chet Atkins tunes and Merle Travis. And it is a great thing to have in your bag of tricks for rhythm guitar. And as a soloist, you know, you can do full solos or just Travis picking solos, and never flat pick or play any single notes at all, and it can sound great. Open strings, yeah. So somebody's asking about open strings and solos, so open string licks or cascading scales. So the idea with using open strings, there's 2 ways you could kind of come at it. One is replacing any note that can be played as an open string with an open string. So any fretted note that, you know, you can find somewhere open, replace it with the open string. The other way is to use the open string as like either a droning note or just simply as an effect. So it might be in key, but it might not be like a note that fits the chord. It might be like a 9 or 11 or a 4 or 2 or a 6 or something like that. But it's more just for the effect of hearing an open string for a moment, or, you know, chicken picking back to an open string. So that's like that's another way to use open strings. But I first got into it by learning, you know, these classic kind of cascading scales. So, you know, taking a G major scale And that's how you would play if you're fretting every note, right? But the idea is try to get it to sound like a, going down the scale on a piano with the sustain pedal down. So every chance I have to let two notes ring into each other, I do. Now the next note is E, so I can play that open, reach over for D, reach over for C. Notice the pinky stayed down the whole time until I needed the B, A, G, F sharp, E, D, C, B, A, G. Okay, so that's what first kind of got me to understand what that's all about, right? So then you start looking at it with licks, and you're like, okay, well, how can I get that in licks? You can take, say, a lick like this, an E. Okay, well, you got a G there. You can play G open, and then you got a G sharp. You can't play open, so you have to fret that one. Okay, and the next one was B. I can play that open. So now you get this weird kind of dissonant lick, right? Or say something like those who do approach notes in G. There's B flat and B against each other. F sharp and G. Now you don't normally play these things slow when you're playing country, so they don't last that long, so it's not like an ugly sound that happens for a long time. But it does add, it adds some special sauce to the solos for sure. The other way that I'll look at that is for certain keys, there's a lot of open strings that work. So I'll do things like use seconds or use thirds, and let's say the key of A. Okay, so for A, I might use thirds, here's A and C sharp and E, C sharp and G, G and B, A and C sharp. I'm just kind of going through all the notes of the chord, right? But I might do something like pick, pick, open. I do these little 3-note pattern. So that's kind of a cool sound to do that. That's right. So that coming down, sorry for all this, no charge for the wrong notes. Coming down, I was doing almost like a backwards roll through all those thirds. Right? I don't think I did that one on the way down, but I knew I did this. And then I walk this down chromatically. Right? So that would be a way of looking at doing thirds. You could also do, tritones, or just basically any notes that kind of fit the chord. The other thing you could do is use seconds. So if I was an E, if I'm an E, I'm taking a B and a C sharp, and then open D string, and then E, F sharp, G. I kind of think of that G as well, that's a bluesy note, and that's a flat third, E there. So it's totally fine with me, and it's only happening for a moment because I'm going to G sharp, B flat, B natural. That's an approach note to B. Makes sense to me. C sharp, D, E. So those are all pretty much seconds, right? And then rolling through. Sorry. So those are 3 approaches that I'll work around in different keys or over different chords to kind of get a bunch of open string stuff happening. Let me see, answer some other questions. Who taught me? Man, I've been lucky. I've had some great teachers, and I'll talk about the teachers I had over the years. Uh, Larry Maltz was my teacher when I was a little kid in New Jersey. I would come up every summer and stay with my grandparents in Florida, or in Jersey from Florida. And he's a great jazz guitar player, and he was really into kind of country blues finger picking. And when I was like, 12 or 13, he was, making me learn all the Mississippi John Hurt and Elizabeth Cotten stuff. And all I wanted to learn was Jimmy Page. I was going bonkers, learning all that stuff. But he turned me up a lot of great music. And then who else did I study with? I studied with Vic Juris for a little while, who's a fantastic jazz guitar player. I even took a couple lessons with Frank Vignola here when I was like in my early 20s. I don't even know if Frank would even remember, and Frank is a great teacher and has great courses here at TrueFire. Love Frank. So yeah, I've had some really great teachers over the years. And when it comes to composition, I was very lucky when I was young, and I got to see Les Paul play all the time. In the summers when I would come up, my grandparents were huge Chet Atkins and Les Paul fans, so they would take me every Monday night to go see Les Paul at Fat Tuesdays here in the city. And I would show up with my Ren and Stimpy T-shirt, and I would ask him, I was like, I just got a 4-track. How do I use this 4-track? I've heard about this thing bouncing tracks, and he would always get a kick out of me, and he would like show me how to do all that stuff, and I would come, and be like, I think I learned your solo on Bye Bye Blues, and give me his guitar and I'd play it for him. But he taught me a lot about obviously how he tracked stuff and how he arranged stuff, which has been very helpful still. And with all those Mary Ford Les Paul recordings, the way those original multi-track recorders work is they basically had one take of everything, and if he messed up, he would have to like build the whole thing from scratch again. So everything was just one take beginning to end, which is cool to think of. Anyway, there's just so many fantastic performances by him and Mary on there. But what he would do is he would take a yellow legal pad and he would map it all out. So he'd be like, oh, I know I want this kind of intro. It's going to have these kind of guitars on it, and then Mary's going to come in, and I'm going to get this some kind of cool shout guitar thing that kind of happened behind her in that second verse, and then the choruses will have this, but just very vague, 20,000 feet above kind of conceptual, and just make a map of the tune, how it's going to work. So he had his intro, he had how it's going to arc, what the solo is going to be like, and then it was just a matter of filling in the blanks, and the tune was going to work, the structure was right, and that's something that has stayed with me. And then friends, it's like I'm very lucky to live in New York, and I'm sure all of you have friends who are great players. And never underestimate the power of just getting together with your friends and playing, or just doing gigs and finding out what everyone's up to and what everyone's playing. There's so many fantastic guitar players here in New York, constantly inspired by people, and I'm lucky to get to play with them on a regular basis. So get to see some things that they do. It's like, oh, that's kind of cool. I'm gonna steal that, or I like the way that you did that. Let me rip that off. Yeah. So let's see. Do you ever play minor country? Like, there's not really much minor country. It's very rare. You don't have minor chords in country. It doesn't happen very often. Maybe like, silver wings shining in the sunlight, roaring engines. Maybe some of that stuff, but I think as Merle's just so steeped in Western swing, you get some minor chords. But honestly, it's pretty rare. I'll visualize minor shapes for things, not that I'm thinking minor, but like there would be common minor shapes, but I'm not seeing them like that at one point. But at one point in my life, when I was learning these little shortcut things before I was really comfortable with the neck where all the notes were, you would use templates and shapes and stuff to embellish. But most inspiring guitar player that I've seen live, oh man, that's a tough one. I've seen some really great stuff. I'll tell you what, my favorite telly player, Duke Levine. I gotta say, I really love that guy. I love his records. I love his phrasing as a soloist, his ideas. I'm a big fan of his playing. He's fantastic. And if you don't know him, check him out. He's really, really good. Anyway, it looks like kind of out of time. Yeah, I hope I answered a bunch of questions, and help you guys out. And yeah, this was fun. You know, I kind of like keeping these things open like this. This is nice, not to use the time just to answer questions. Looks like a weird sound. Yeah, so if any of you guys ever want to do a private lesson, you know how to find me. If you ever want to do a lesson through TrueFire, if you have weird schedules and you just want to do the quick 10-minute thing, that's cool too. You can get things done that way also. So, and of course, check out the courses. Let me know what you think. And yeah, this is great. It's great hearing from you guys. And I'm sure I'll be back on. I'll see you soon. All right, take care, guys. Good night.